Brienne is based in LaGrange, well, Plum, right?
Plum, yeah.
And so our homestead is based in a small town called Cedar Creek, and I'll share some photos and takeaways from our place. But I will say, as everyone trickles in, my favorite discovery the last few months was that black landscaping cloth that you suggested. Like,
none of the other stuff worked.
Nothing else worked.
Once you try that stuff, you're literally looking around your property and you're like, everything is getting this. Like every pile of metal, every piece of like rebar that's laying around, everything needs that underneath
our fire pit area, because we can't mow over there. So it's just like weeds everywhere brushing up to it. I was like, if I could just put that black
just everywhere
around it, then
we had contractors build the little patio area, and Becca bought the supplies, and we didn't get a good garden cloth.
That commercial, you really gotta have the commercial one. But the key too, I've learned, you really have to put the newspaper and cardboard under it still. Yeah, you really want to do that stuff.
Yes, we did cardboard. I have a photo of we did the newspaper, cardboard, and mulch, and we watered everything. The newspaper and cardboard was wet. Then we did the mulch, and then I have a picture of what it looked like 6 months later.
Oh yeah,
and where we did that at our gardening club. No weeds were there or anything, and I have a picture of what it looks like to the mound to the left that didn't get that treatment because we ran out of newspaper.
You were performing an experiment.
Yes.
Right? You're collecting data.
Well, experience is the greatest teacher.
Amen.
And that grass it's a never ending struggle.
It's the hardest part. It's, we get to garden year round here, which is great, but then we have to deal with the grass. And so that's our biggest struggle.
Yeah. And the sticker burrs.
But also an asset when you start getting into using livestock to manage the grass, then your grass is an asset.
Yeah.
And then you're turning it into valuable stuff.
Yeah. Next level.
Yeah.
Shout out to Lynette. She's here in Central Texas.
Oh, yes.
Lynette gets to come to the virtual stuff and all the in-person stuff.
Yeah.
So folks should consider moving down here to Centex.
Gardening club on Sunday. We had a nice, productive day.
Go ahead and take it away, Becca. Okay. Remember, you got to hit escape here for yours to go out of full screen and then go to present on Brienne's, okay?
Right.
And then don't forget, Brienne Cam, Becca, and Brienne Cam.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right. Thank you for joining the Spring Garden Planning Masterclass. I'm Rebecca Bush. I'm joined by Brienne of Plum Fabulous Foods, and we are going to share some information to help you with your spring garden planning. I actually started with seed starters, which I learned in your class to do it with the lights inside for the spring in February. And then everything was ready to be moved 3 weeks later in March. So I'm going to share some pictures kind of our progress, things that we've been working on our homestead. And then I'll have Brienne take it away because I am an amateur aspiring gardener, but you've had many years of experience. And so it's a labor of love, and you are a absolute professional in this space. So it's an honor having you here, and let's get right on into it. Okay, so first of all, I like this little quote. It says, remember that children, marriages, and flower gardens reflect the kind of care they get. So I have put a lot of time into our garden. And still to this day, it's like a labor of love, and things aren't looking exactly in that picture graphic. That's how I want things to look. And then the reality of how things look. So it's always an ongoing, I feel, project. However, what matters most is the harvest. And it was so rewarding. I had planted this garlic, I think in like October, and just harvesting it a couple days ago. Maybe it was November when it got planted. And anyway, it was exciting because I had never harvested garlic before, and we had like 10 of them. So the people at Gardening Club got to go away. I found like 4 more yesterday that were hiding. So, and we didn't have any insects in those beds too. Right. So it's kind of, a synergistic thing. But back to giving the kind of care they get. So here is a picture of how out of control our garden has gotten. So had I been able the last month to give a little more energy to putting the stake pens and the black tarp. Now, most importantly, I can walk there without getting sticker burrs or weeds. So I had to hold it down with something heavy, which we just had extra fencing material. But my plan was to do the stake pens, make it look really nice and clean. And then our guest house flooded, and I've been dealing with that for over a month. But what's most important is I was able to take my seed starters, get them planted, and look, this is a fruiting tomato starting to come up, which I think I transplanted and put them in end of March or mid-March, late March. And so here we are now a month later, and things are really popping off. They were like this big when I put them in the ground, and now they're like 3 feet tall. So it's very exciting. Now I just have to keep the hornworms off of them. Yeah. Just 2 things that I wanted to share also in the class that you teach, the notebook and designing and drawing. I put it onto paper based on our beds that we have set up. So this looks different for everyone, but I kept having to draw these boxes every time I would change the seasons. So I decided to get on this program, which maybe this is helpful for other people, depending on whatever your garden space looks like. And I just made a digital one. So now I just print this, and then I can write what I've planted in each bed. And anyway, that's been nice because it's saving me time in the long run. And also then I know what I've put where. So here's a few photos of our garden, and we have lemon balm, a lot of tomatoes. I planted things based on what we were ordering from our grocery store checklist, which we eat a lot of tomatoes, we eat a lot of spinach and greens. And then green onion, we planted watermelons. And I wanted to share this lastly. So the technique that Brienne taught about wetting newspaper and then the cardboard on top, and then 6 inches at least of mulch. So we did this at our garden club in September, and it kind of just broke down. We waited a while, and then in late March, there were no weeds there. But look at everywhere to the right and look at everywhere to the left. So it's a very effective technique and method.
Yeah, that bed looks beautiful.
Yeah. And it was like ready to plant in and super like good moisture retention. So I put like watermelon and some squash there so they could crawl around. And they're just babies right now, but okay, that's it for my spiel.
And I love that bed. That's what we think of when we're ready to like go plant, is we think we're going to go out there with our plants and it's going to look like that. And we just dig in the dirt and we plant. And often it looks like the spot on the left or the right where we have to go in there and do like a lot of work.
Yes.
And then put the cute little baby plant in the ground.
Yes.
And that's the part that we want to avoid.
Yeah, I did. I had to get a metal rake because I did kind of, I don't like to clear things out like that till or whatever, but I had to in order to walk over there. But the area that had the cardboard and the newspaper underneath and the mulch, and it sat there for a few months, was like so ready
easy
to roll.
So easy to do.
All right, Brienne, if you want to introduce yourself and take it away, and I will find your slideshow.
All right, so I'm Brienne Burnson with Plum Fabulous Foods. We are a small organic farm in Plum, Texas. We've been gardening for 15 years now. A couple years before that, we were in town. I'm self-taught. I taught myself how to garden from reading a book. And then we ended up writing our own because Texas is fabulous in the fact that you can garden year round. But most of the gardening books that you'll read are meant for the north, and they get hard freezes. And so they don't have the same kind of problems with grass that we do down here. And so everything that we do revolves around managing grass 100%. So we kind of took a blend of the Back to Eden method and then the new square foot gardening method, and we merged those together and then figured out a way that we could deal with Texas's grass. And then that's kind of the system that we put together and we try to teach people about, because we've made a ton of mistakes in the last 15 years. And it's a real passion for us to help people get over that learning curve. Like Rebecca probably would come to most of the same conclusions if she spent 15 years making the same mistakes that we did. And so we just really are trying to get people in the beginning phases, or sometimes they can try to retrofit their gardens to adopt some of our methods and just save themselves 3 things that we all need more of: time, energy, and money.
Yes.
Okay? All right. So we do have a website, plumfabulousfoods.com. We have our book available on there. We have our garden journal too that we have a blank version of now that you can print out. And so we have free resources on there. We have YouTube videos and all sorts of things. We do in-person tours and classes, and we love working with John and Rebecca and Live Free Academy and their Exit and Build program, so we can reach as many people as we can and help them.
Yeehaw. All right. So I just pulled up the slideshow. However, this is not how I want it to look.
You said go to the 3 dots, I think.
Ew. All right. Here comes John, my tech guy.
What?
Present? Is it present?
Yeah, present.
Yeah, here we go. Woohoo. Oh, yes.
Okay. And this is a picture of our garden here. Whoa.
Do you want to move it closer
Okay.
so it's easier for your reach?
Is there a way to make it? There you go.
Oh, that's a weird presenter mode.
So it wasn't me.
Present.
And then you screen share.
We'll do entire screen. Okay. And then be mindful.
Can I toggle with these? Or do
probably.
I have to use?
Let's
Okay.
see.
It's wireless. So that's good. No cords.
There, but you can't click anything else. And then
Gotcha.
be mindful of staying in that little box.
Okay. Sounds good.
Nice sound effect, John.
Okay, so this is a picture of our current garden. It is 32 feet by 110. It's less than 1/10 of an acre, and we've been harvesting an average of 3,000 pounds a year for the last several years.
That is a substantial amount.
All right, so these are our top 10 tips for helping people out. Start small. Okay, like don't start with a ginormous garden or you're going to hate it. You're going to drive yourself crazy. It's going to be too much work. It's like having children. We start with one and then you have another and your heart grows and you can handle the children. It's the same thing with gardening. Begin with a great design. So I loved Rebecca's quote. It was perfect. It so matches the same way that we feel about gardening. You can have a fabulous designed garden, but if you don't ever go out there, it's not going to grow. Or you can have a really poorly designed garden and you're out there all the time maintaining it and it's barely going to grow. So we try to find a nice, happy balance between a well-established, like a well set up and designed garden and spending as little time out there as we possibly can to get as much output as we possibly can. So it's all about the soil. We believe in creating your own soil rather than using what you have. Because if you use your native soil, you're going to have to spend time amending it, soil test, those sorts of things. And if you just start with your own soil that's very easy to create using compost and mulch, then you're going to start off on the right foot right from the beginning. When you have really great soil, you can ignore a lot of the gardening rules that they tell you. So like how far apart you plant your plants, what can you put next to those plants? All of those things we throw out the window. And if you have a bed that's really densely packed with vegetables, then you're not going to have a chance for those weeds to grow because you're going to be promoting the kind of things that you want growing in that space. We always like having 3 to 4 foot wide beds. That's the best utilization of your space. Anything wider than that, then you can't sit on the side and like reach your arm in and harvest. So anything narrower than that is a poor utilization of your space. We encourage people to grow vertical anytime you can. So we do a lot of trellising with tomatoes, cantaloupe, cucumbers, baby watermelon, squash, beans. It's very important that you feed your garden every year. You can't create fabulous garden soil once and then walk away from it and think that you're done. Okay. And I see this mistake a lot of times. You have to feed your soil. You can't take plants out of your soil all year long and never put anything back in the soil. Because
so that's like compost.
You got to have compost. Yeah. So we've never used fertilizer in our garden ever. We've used one bag that somebody gave me to try to promo for them. But other than that, we've never used any fertilizer. I've had soil tests done on my garden just to prove to people that the numbers were great. And it said 0 on everything that is a typical addition that farmers have to put onto their soil. So we had flying colors with all of our micronutrients and minerals that the garden needed. So homemade compost is really great. Plus, when you have a garden, you got to pull all these dead plants out. But what are you going to do with them? Yep. You turn them back into soil. You got to put them somewhere.
Symbiotic.
Yeah, it's very symbiotic. Absolutely. And then if you introduce animals into that equation as well, now you're feeding them. They're giving you their manure, and so it's a fabulous relationship. And it should be go without saying by now, but grow organic. If you do use fertilizers, chemical fertilizers, you're going to overly feed the microorganisms in your soil with nitrogen. They're going to get like spastic crazy. It's crazy feeding day in the soil. They're going to overpopulate. And then that nitrogen's going to run out. They're all going to die off because now there's no food. And you're going to have a really high salt content in your soil after that. So it's like a quick fix. And it looks great for a little while, but in the long run, it's not good for you. And it's definitely not good for your soil.
Yep. And it's expensive.
It is. Yeah. All right. So just like Rebecca was teaching you guys, the most important thing is to start with a plan. So you don't know how many plants to sit down and plan or when to plan them if you don't know what you're going to be growing, if you don't know what you have space to be growing. And so these are all really important things to keep in mind. So we like to do a simple sketch like this when we're building a garden for somebody. We like to lay out like how far apart the T-posts are going to be. And that tells us how many we're going to buy and how far apart the beds, how wide the beds are going to be. So we know, do we get 3-foot landscape fabric or 4-foot landscape fabric? You know, what are their needs and stuff?
Less cutting.
That's right. That's right. All right. Again, going back to weeds, I don't have time to weed. I don't like to weed. I don't know anybody that does. And so we've learned a lot of things over the year to help keep weeds out. And one of those things are these dense plantings that we're talking about. So you can see I totally ignore all the spacing requirements that they say. This is a bed of beets up here. And like, there's just no chance for weeds to grow in that. Plus, I'm getting the most out of my soil. When you have really loose soil like this, it's very easy to broadcast seed things out. You're not having to go in there and thin. I never thin my beds, ever, ever, ever. Plants will grow. Strongest, healthiest ones get harvested first. Everything else gets left in the soil, and it kind of moves each other out of the way as they need to grow. And so instead of having to do a staggered planting, especially in the summertime, instead of having to go out there every 2 weeks and re-sow beets, well, I just throw the whole bag out there and then harvest as we need to. It does make it a little bit harder to harvest in the very beginning when it's like a jungle in there.
Because you're looking for the biggest ones.
Yeah. But it's worth it to not have to go in there. I just think it's silly to kill seedlings, to go in there and thin things out so that things have space to grow. I've never done that. I've never adopted that practice, and things grow just fine. So, and the benefit again is that weeds don't have a chance to grow.
Yeah, there's so much attention already for the beets. It's like they've already got the party started.
Yeah. And they're taking up all the soil space. So you can see here, this is one. I had 2 beds of carrots like this last year. And so from April 19th to June 26th, I harvested 133 pounds of carrots from this one bed. This bed was 4 foot by 20 foot. It's an 80-foot square foot bed, you know. And this is what it was like. Every 2 weeks I was harvesting carrots like that from it. And it literally kept looking like that because as you pull those bigger carrots out, well, now all the ones that are small, they suddenly have enough, light and stuff to grow. And you can see this is what it looks like on the side. They are all growing right next to each other. And in a conventional garden, they would tell you don't do this. Yep. But when you follow these methods and you have really great soil, your soil can support that amount of growth in a small space.
That's amazing.
So again, starting seeds, I'm really happy to hear that you did that this year.
Yeah, because I used to cheat and I would go to like community gardens and buy the seed starters already. And so it actually has saved us a lot of money.
It does. Yeah.
And it's kind of fun to just go in there and see them grow every day.
Oh, it is. So. Yeah. It makes you feel successful right from the beginning. So we plant thousands of plants a year. So it's a huge money saver for us. We still have to go and get backups. Like I consider those things backups now. And it's great that we can go to a local nursery and get good plants still. But I'm like you, I want to control the varieties. I want to control the time. And in 8 square feet, I can grow 600 plants. If you just have a shelf and some shop lights, then that's everything you need. Another thing that we've really started to encourage people to do when I'm sowing seeds out directly in the garden, I really like to pre-sprout them. So anybody that's been in the health world for a while, you know about sprouting seeds. So these sprouting jars. So just like you would sprout microgreens or something that you're going to eat in your kitchen, if you pre-sprout your beets or your corn or some of those things, when you put them out in the garden, you just saved days of germination time, and you've controlled their moisture so that you know that they're going to sprout. You have to be very delicate with them, because if you knock off that root, you know, it's not going to grow another one. That was it. So if you can be careful with them, this is a huge time saver, and again, really ensures success in the garden.
Maybe that's why we've never been able to grow corn.
Corn, you know, it took me 3 years of failing before I grew corn. So pre-germinate your seeds and see if that helps. We're really lucky in Texas because we have 2 corn growing cycles, not just one. So if you missed the first one, try again.
Yes.
All right. Before we plant, we have to prep our bed. So just like Rebecca showed you guys in that picture of her bed, where she had already gone out there and put down newspaper, compost, and mulch. Once you do that to build your garden bed, you don't have to keep doing that every year. After that, you just need to prep your bed by putting some newspaper on top and then a fresh layer of mulch or compost. Because again, you want to feed your bed every year. So we typically do this in the spring or the fall. Typically it's in the fall because in the spring we're butchering chickens and we're busy and we don't have time. But if you take the time to do this, this is like a 10-minute step. Okay. You clean everything out of the bed, couple sheets of newspaper, get it wet, and a couple buckets of compost on top. Then when you're coming out to plant, it's ready. And all you have to do is poke a little hole through that newspaper and get your transplant in the soil below it. Super simple. And this keeps you from having to weed all summer long.
Yeah. Can I ask if this would work too? Because we tried this and I'm curious to see if it's a long-term solution. We planted our tomatoes in the row crops and put cardboard around them and then put the mulch on top. So the plant was there, but then around it, we did the cardboard.
It's the same thing. I use newspaper because my beds get rotated out so much. Cardboard takes a long time to break down. So like if that bed was always going to be something that just grew in the middle, then you're fine. Like you wouldn't want to broadcast seed carrots on top of that bed because they wouldn't be able to punch through the cardboard. So it just depends on what your setup is. Like I know you guys have some of the taller beds, the wicking beds, and you have some in the ground. So like your ones in the ground would probably be ideal. So anytime you use cardboard or newspaper, organically accepted method for weed prevention. So you're good to go. Just be sure and pull the tape off, because the tape will not break down.
I did pull the tape off, and we tried to get newspaper, and that's like, I need your recycling connection. I went to so many libraries, banks, all these places, like nobody reads the newspaper anymore. I'm like, oh no. So we were like stashing Austin Chronicles, whatever we would go to tap. Anyway, we got enough for that one mound, but it's a rare commodity these days.
Well, and that's an important point, is to use what you have access to. You know, like if you have access to a ton of pizza boxes, like use pizza boxes. You know, some cardboard is thicker than others. And so I think that's a great option. All right, so let's dig into the plants now. So we are in such a long growing season here in Texas that I break it down into 3 different areas. We have early spring, mid-spring, and then late spring. So early spring, these are the plants that we start actually back in December. I seed out my tomatoes and pepper plants on December 15th.
Wow.
And they grow for 3 months under my grow lights. And I do upplant them at some point. We do have videos on our website that show how to do that. But those plants specifically will keep growing in small containers fabulously, wonderfully. So as long, we try to give them as much of a head start as possible. You can't do that with everything, but with these, you definitely can. So we're starting them 3 months before the average last frost date. Be sure that you plan on hardening off anything that you're starting inside so that they get used to that transition to the outside world. And then also included in the early spring crops are going to be your green peas and potatoes. So did y'all plant potatoes in the spring?
We did potatoes in the fall last year. And I don't know if I showed you the pictures. I think I texted you. We were successful in that. The baby potatoes. Because we should have done the bigger ones. I think you said in like August or September maybe. So we did the organic smaller ones. And those were successful. And we harvested, I think, end of November.
Okay. Yeah. So spring is really our big potato season. Okay. And so if you're looking for a massive potato crop, because potatoes are nice because they're one of the few sources of carbohydrates that we can grow. And so if you're a farmer, then we focus on, there's not a whole lot, you know, there's like corn and potatoes are really the primary ones for calorie density for carbohydrates. Right. So, Potatoes are a big crop for us because our family eats quite a few of them. All right, tomato tips. So these are the things that I most commonly get asked about tomatoes. So for one, it's very important to trellis your tomatoes. So there's two types of tomatoes that you can grow. One is called a determinate and the other is an indeterminate. So the indeterminate grow for an indeterminate amount of time. That's the best way I can explain to remember it. They're the vining tomatoes. They will vine as long as there's growing conditions conducive. So mine have an 8-foot tall trellis. They go all the way up the 8-foot tall trellis. They come down, touch the ground, re-root, and then start growing again. So by the end of the season, it's a total tomato jungle. Yeah. It's a little scary to go in there, especially when the garden spiders come out and start making nests throughout there.
You put your hand in.
You have to like walk through it. Like I have a tunnel of arches of tomatoes that are just huge. And it's at some point I just get tired of going in there. But a majority of what we grow about 100 tomato plants a year, and 75 of them are indeterminates. And those are going to be like your classic heirloom tomatoes. So like the black crims and the some of the beefsteaks and all the crazy looking ones, those are all going to be indeterminate tomatoes. Determinate tomatoes are the smaller bushing ones, and they're really the ones that have been cultivated to be small because it's very difficult in the commercial world to deal with these indeterminate, crazy monster, out of control growing beast, you know?
At scale.
Right. Yeah. Right. So in the commercial world, they prefer the determinants because they put all their fruit on at once, then they can be harvested, the plant can be removed from the ground, and they can do it again. So indeterminates are like slow and steady. They'll produce all the way up until the first freeze, but they do just get out of control in their size. So you want to prune indeterminates. You don't need to prune determinates. So determinates, again, they're going to set all their fruit at once. You're going to harvest them, and then you can go ahead and pull that plant out of the ground. An indeterminate will, if you don't prune it, it's going to really put all of its energy into making lots of green leaves and branches. If you do prune it, then it will put its energy into forcing the fruit that sets on that plant to mature and develop. And that's what we want. We're looking for maximum output. So on the bottom picture here, I'm always doing experiments in my garden to see what efforts do we do that are worth the effort? Like what things people say, do this and this and this. And so I always do experiments to say, well, is it worth it?
Yeah, test it.
That's right. Like maybe it does help me, but if it doesn't help me like a lot, I'm not going to spend the time doing it. Yeah. You know, like if I did all the gardening advice that everybody said, like maybe my garden would be 10% better, but everything that we're not doing because it doesn't make that big of a difference. Yeah. So
it's like in permaculture, input, output.
That's right.
Input doesn't justify that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So you can see here the difference. I love this picture because this clearly shows the difference. The one on the left has had heavy pruning. So the plants are focusing on going taller and setting their fruit. Yeah. It's not focusing on making 62,000 side branches and getting big and bushy. Yeah. And that's what you can see how bushy the one is in the middle. And because of the angle of the camera, you can't quite see this one on the end here, but they just get wider and greener and foliated. And that's not what we're looking for. And I don't eat tomato branches.
Yeah, less tomatoes and just
a lot of big, crazy growth. Yeah.
That's what we did all day Sunday for gardening club was we pruned tomatoes.
Yeah. That's awesome.
I planted like 7 different types of tomatoes. And so,
Yeah. I was doing that last night too. And if you get the stuff all over your hands, I don't know if you wear gloves when you
stuff.
It's like a green film that will cover your fingers. Gojo is really great at getting that off. It's worth getting that.
I should have worn gloves because I did get bit by a scorpion recently in the garden. So, but I still didn't wear gloves on Sunday.
Yeah, I don't ever wear gloves, so I hear you.
Yeah, but makes you stronger.
That's right. That's right. Another tip that we like to tell people: if you have a real problem with pests, then you can pick your tomatoes when they're green and they're just starting to blush and bring them inside and finish ripening them then.
Okay.
So when people, when stores advertise vine ripened tomatoes, they are not leaving those tomatoes on the vine until they are bright red and soft they are not doing that. Because once you do that, your shelf life is like 2 days.
Wow.
So they can't commercially ship them. When they say vine ripened tomatoes, they are allowing a green tomato to get that first hint of the blush stage, and then they're harvesting it.
And then it lasts how much longer?
Oh, just so long. So we had our first freeze like mid-December this year. I picked 70 pounds of green tomatoes that were on my tomato plants at that time. And I was still canning tomato sauce like well into January because they were still ripening, a month and a half later. And there were so many at once I could actually can tomato sauce, which is crazy.
That's the next class we should do, is a canning class.
Yeah.
Make some marinara.
That's right. Yeah. So don't when I tell people this, they're always like, oh, but I wanted you're getting vine ripened tomatoes. And you're going to save yourself. If you leave a tomato on the vine until it's all fully red, you are just inviting pests because they're going to smell it. And they're going to all come.
And ours cracked. Like they would get cracks from the sun.
Yeah, so the cracking is typically evidence of uneven watering.
Oh.
So if you don't have a drip irrigation system, then that would be the reason for that.
Yeah, so, we were watering we just bought a drip irrigation system. Mm-hmm. We haven't installed it yet.
Okay.
So we were planning to put the first one in the food forest since that's where the trees are and they're a little more fragile in their early years. And then the next project will be the garden. But until then, I'm going plant to plant with my hose.
Wow.
Because last year I would broadcast.
Yeah.
And then the weeds were like, hello.
Yeah. So aerial watering like that, not only you're watering the wind-blown wind seeds, but you're also more likely to get fungal diseases and bacterial diseases that way because water from above promotes that. So drip irrigation really is it's a fabulous investment. Yeah. So you'll want to keep an eye on if you get a big rain anytime this summer and you have watermelon or cantaloupe or tomatoes on the vine, you'll want to be ready to pick those quickly because they're the ones that are going to want to split.
Yeah. And we had a lot of that was another thing, is learning when to harvest the melons, which I think I planted in the spring, but started to be ready in like June-ish.
Yeah.
And sometimes I would think that they needed to stay there longer. And the next thing you know, there were like maggots underneath and they're like, eating. I'm like, oh my gosh, I was like yesterday, like how did this happen so quickly?
Yeah. Well,
but after a big
remind me and we'll try to touch on that. But yeah, for sure, the raining, if you have drip irrigation, then you have such a constant supply of moisture in the soil that when you do get a big rain, it's not a shock to the plant.
Yeah.
But if you're getting like a full drying out of the soil in between waterings, then that's when you have to be careful.
Someone was asking about what you put on your hands to get that green film off. What the
Gojo? It's like I don't know. It's like if you were working in a shop, you use it to clean the oil off your hands and stuff.
Just removes it right off.
Yeah, because when you work with tomatoes, it gets some kind of crazy film on your skin. It's really your hands will be so dark forever. It looks.
So Gojo is what it's called. Gojo.
That's right. Correct. Okay. So back to potatoes, because that is, again, one of our early season crops. We put ours in like around February 9th here in Texas, but just look at your average first freeze date or your average last freeze date. This 13 to 16 weeks before your average first freeze, that's going to be for fall potatoes. So really 4 to 6 weeks before your average last freeze. So if your last freeze is in March 15th, then if you count back 5 weeks, that puts you at February 9th, which is what we use. So potatoes are started from seed potatoes, or you can go to the grocery store and just buy organic potatoes because they haven't been sprayed with the anti-sprouting stuff that commercial potatoes are sprayed with. You only need a 2 to 3 ounce piece. And so if you have a giant potato, you can cut that into smaller pieces, actually like get a scale out and kind of weigh it and make sure that it's the right size, and make sure that it has an eye on it. And when we're planting potatoes, I like to dig the furrows and I want to leave the potatoes exposed until I'm done arranging them, because I might get to the end and have like 10 potatoes left. Then I'll go back and I'll scoot everything down a little bit. You know, and if you've got everything covered, you can't remember where you planted. And so we leave it all open. We have a great video on our website, just shows the entire process of planting a bed if you want to learn more about that. But I love this picture at the bottom because it is a good testament as to why we have sidewalks in our garden.
Yes.
And so some people think, well, I don't want to spare 3 feet for a sidewalk. And let me just assure you, you are going to be using that space.
Yeah.
You know, you may not have stuff planted in that space, but the roots of those plants are going to be under those walkways, and the foliage of those plants are going to be using those walkways. So it's really nice when I'm harvesting this bed on the bottom, how I can sit on that nice black plastic. I'm not sitting in dirt, and I can harvest.
Like me last year, sitting in sticker burrs.
Oh yeah, or fire ants are even worse.
Yep.
All right, mid-season plants. So these are the ones that we consider, they grow really fast. So they have like a 30 to 45 day growth cycle from when they're started to seed to when they're harvested, or even sometimes when they're pulled out of the garden. So we like to start these about 3 weeks before our average last freeze date. They grow really fast as baby plants. And so like tomatoes and peppers and eggplants, they take forever. They grow so slowly, which is why we start them so early. These guys, like you just turn around and look back and they're already like 2 inches taller than they were when you last saw them.
The butternut squash we planted last year was like that. It was prolific.
It grows
and it came up so fast.
Yeah. So I learned a long time ago, I used to start these seeds at the same time I started some of my others. And like, they're huge by the time it was ready to put them out in the garden. And then they're not really healthy. It's not really healthy to grow these plants to a giant size and then try to transplant them. They get a lot more of a shock. And there's quite a few of the mid-season crops that are best direct seeded. And again, I just want to encourage you to pre-sprout the ones that you can. So beets and radishes, even turnips, you can pre-sprout in a sprouting jar. Carrots are pretty tiny. I don't think I would try to do that. But those are all best planted also right before a rain. That's a really good way to just ensure that you get an even watering during that germination stage.
Someone also asked, John wants me to make sure I click a button so we're both on.
There you go.
Ooh, fancy. Okay, do you use sprouting jars to pre-sprout the seeds? I saw that question after we had moved on from that topic. Mm-hmm. Since you're talking about it again.
I just use a mason jar that has a sprouting lid. So it's not like a specific sprouting jar. It just has a screen. You can buy them at Sprouts, a little sprouting screen.
Yep.
Yeah, and they're fabulous. All right, squash tips. I tried to pick the plants I get the most questions about. Everybody wants to know about squash bugs. Yes, you're going to get them 100%, unless it's the very first year of your garden. Typically on the first year, you won't see them, but after that, 100% guarantee they will come. So we don't use pesticides in our garden. We do like to use a barrier method. So when we first plant our squash plants, and I mean literally like the day of, you need to cover your bed with some kind of netting. If you plant your squash plants and come back a week later to cover them, the squash bugs will already be there. Okay.
They come in fast.
Yeah. So just when you're trying to figure out like your plan for the garden for that day, and if your plan is to plant a squash bed, make sure that you have the supplies and the time to cover it also. Because I can't tell you how many times I've planted the squash bed, gone to my garage to get the netting, only to realize I'm out of netting, So make sure that you have your supplies on hand before you get started. And then I kind of wish like I hadn't planted my squash. And sometimes I'll even like pick them back up.
Because they come in that fast.
Because they come in that fast. Absolutely. So we leave that netting on until the squash start flowering. And then you're going to have to pull it off in the morning so that they can get pollinated by the bees. You can like drop it during the rest of the day, but for sure in the morning, they need to get that pollination. Another thing that we like to do once the plants start getting bigger is you can just manually look for the squash bugs. I have read that if you squash the squash bugs, which they make a very distinct smell, they're like, I can typically smell squash bugs before I ever see them because they have I can't even describe it. Once you squish one, you'll know.
Like rotten
it's a
eggs,
very, I don't know how to describe it. But so what we like to do is just take an empty soda bottle or something and put a little bit of dish soap in there. And then we put a live squash bugs in there and drown them.
Yeah.
And actually it makes me very happy when I see this entire bottle of deads drowning squash bugs. But again, if you squeeze them, then they emit this smell. And I think that attracts other squash bugs. Yeah. The other thing you want to be looking for the adult squash bugs like to hide on the underside of the plants. So you want to pick up the bottom leaves and inspect for those. Then the other thing you want to do is take a piece of duct tape and wrap it so it's sticky side out on your finger. And you want to pick up these bottom leaves and look for eggs. So you'll see there'll be clusters of little brown or brownish eggs all together on one of the leaves, and you just pick them off with that duct tape. Okay. So that's about all we do to manage the squash bugs. When you have the plants covered and they're able to get to the stage where they're at least flowering, they're healthy and big enough that they'll be able to take some squash bug damage. They're going to set some fruit, and then at some point they will succumb to the damage of it. So at that point, we pull all the squash plants out of our garden. We have no squash in our garden for 2 weeks, and then we plant again. And typically in that 2-week period, the squash bugs have moved on to somebody else's garden, and we're able to have another round of it.
Time to get the eviction notice.
That's right. Another thing that we really like to do is we grow this variety. It's called Rampicante, and it is, or Trombacino is another name. It is a solid stem squash. So the squash bugs don't like it. They don't attack it. And it is a fabulous squash because you can pick it in the summer squash stage. So it's very tender like a yellow squash or a zucchini. Or you can leave it in your garden and you can allow it to go to the winter squash stage where it develops that hard rind on the outside and it tastes just like a butternut squash.
Wow.
So it's a dual purpose. I don't know of any other dual purpose squashes that you can treat like that to eat it either way.
I was like looking at this picture the whole time. I'm like, is
yeah,
that a cucumber squash?
No, and what's fabulous. So the whole neck is all flesh. So when you get to a butternut squash, it's got that nice little neck with no seeds, and then it's got the seed cavity, right?
Yeah.
Well, this thing is like all neck.
Ooh.
And so we canned a bunch of it last year. We had so much of this squash. I will warn you, it is a giant plant. Like if you plant one plant, it's probably going to take a 20 by 20 area. Wow. Like it's huge.
Yeah, look at your hand.
Right. Yeah.
Rest of it.
I mean, and it doesn't it grows all summer long. It's very, it just can handle a lot of stresses, but I really like it because it's so productive and it doesn't have a problem with the squash bugs. So variety is very important when you're picking things to be successful with. All right, let's talk about corn. Corn is one of those things that we're going to direct seed. Again, if you can pre-sprout it, that's going to do a lot of good for you to get it through that delicate germination stage. Because in those 3 to 5 days that most seeds need to germinate, you have to keep the moisture just right. And so if you can control that in your kitchen, that's, you're going to be that much more successful.
Higher probability.
Yeah. So again, in Texas, we have 2, I've even done 3 plantings of corn in one season before.
Wow.
So plant it, harvest it, plant it, harvest it, plant it, harvest it. If you watch the dates just right. The trick is to know how many days your corn is going to be. And it can't be in the flowering stage when it's above 90 degrees. So if you can figure out the dates just right, you can get 3. But for sure, you can get 2 planting seasons. They do the first planting season 1 to 6 weeks after the average last freeze date. I actually put mine in like 2 or 3 weeks before the average last freeze date. I tend to watch the farmers around me who grow corn commercially. Okay. And when I see them putting seed in, I know it's time. Because those guys, their whole livelihood is resting on this. And they really know what they're doing. Just keep in mind, if you are pre-sprouting the seeds, that yours is going to be 5 days faster than theirs. And so if I see farmers around me planting, I go start pre-sprouting mine in my sprouting jars, and then I can plant mine, and then mine will catch up with theirs right away.
Yep.
So there's 3 different varieties of corn that you can grow. The sweet corn that everybody loves. Unfortunately, most of it's hybridized or bioengineered. And so
that means it's not heirloom.
That's correct. Okay. So that means that they've done some manipulation. If it's hybrid, that just means that they've cross-pollinated 2 plants. Okay, so nature does that. So that's not crazy. You can eat that. It's not going to change your DNA. The bioengineered or genetically modified corn, those are the ones where they've gone in on a molecular level and changed the DNA of the plant. Okay.
Yeah.
You can't wash that off.
Yeah.
That's been permanently changed. And so we avoid those like the plague. Sweet corn, like the heirloom sweet corns, there's only like a handful of varieties. So you're a little bit more limited. Then you've also got field corn or flour corn. So again, carbohydrates that farmers can grow, this is one of them. And then finally you have your popcorn. So those are all different varieties of corn. You cannot grow a sweet corn and like turn it into popcorn. It doesn't work like that. So we grow a variety of flour corn that is, it's a Native American variety. It's called Painted Mountain, and it's beautiful. The corn cobs have every different known color to man that corn grows. So they're beautiful, reds and purples and oranges and blues and just beautiful corn. And we can either harvest it in the milk stage so it tastes like sweet corn, or we can leave it on the plants and allow it to dry out and we turn it into masa. So
is that what they use for the tamales?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
So you have cornmeal, which is just dried corn that's ground. And then you have masa, which is dried cornmeal or dried corn that has been nixtamalized. So they soak it in lime water overnight. And then the next day you can rub it and you can get that hull off of the outer part of the corn. Then you re-dry that and then you grind that, and that's masa. And if you're ever going to have to pick between one or the other at the store, between cornmeal and masa, always get masa, because it's going to be so much easier for your body to digest it because it's had that outer hull removed. And so a lot of times, like if you eat corn, you can see it.
Yeah,
when you pass it,
you're like,
because it hasn't.
That's
right, because it doesn't break it down because it's a seed and it's got a protective endosperm around it that's going to keep it from germinating until the condition is right. So if you can break that down using this nixtamalization process that all ancient cultures that ate corn did, then your body's going to be able to take up the nutrients that the corn wants to give you. So we go through that process. Yeah. You will also 100%, if you grow corn, 100% you're going to get corn silk worms. So a corn silkworm lays its eggs in these silks that the corn stalks will start making when they're making an ear of corn. So to keep the corn earworm away, you just take some mineral oil in a syringe and you squirt it on those silks and you won't have any problem with them.
What, like a mineral oil would be like magnesium?
No, it's just called mineral oil.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So just HEB or whatever grocery store and buy some mineral oil. And then I just use like a baby syringe or some kind of dropper to squirt it in there. Yeah. And I typically only have to do it one time. Most of my corn will all put the silks on at the same time. They're only out there for like 10 to 15 days. And so maybe you'll get to do it twice, but most plants, I only have to do it that one time. And it's totally worth the 10 minutes it takes to go out there and do it. There's nothing worse than harvesting an ear of corn, pulling it open, and there's a bunch of worms on the top. Yeah, that's gross. Yeah. So take the time to, that's right. If you want to know, we were talking about harvesting. Sometimes it's hard to know when to harvest certain things. So corn, it's time to harvest it when those silks are all dried out. You can kind of see it in this picture on the back of this one that's got the really tender looking silks. That one behind it, the silks are all dried out. So that's one thing that you're going to look for. And then the other thing is you're going to be able to feel the pulp, the plump kernels through the corn stalk. So you can feel up and down that whole ear of corn, and you should be able to feel the undulations for the different corn kernels. And then two, you can just kind of peel back the top, but just know that when you do that, like the fire ants are going to find it faster.
Exposes it to
it's a little,
predators.
like you really want to make, like you want to check these other things first, and then you want to do that. But you don't want to just break it off and harvest it and then open it out, and feel like, oh, if it just had 3 more days, this would have been great, but it's not really even edible right now. So we want to make sure we're harvesting things at the right time.
So is the color brown on the ones that are ready for the?
Yeah, when they dry out, they turn that dark brown color. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, so you can see fresh silks. They look like a little blonde tow-headed child, and then the ones in the back, they're all dried up, shriveled up. And if you're growing corn for the field or flour corn, or if you're growing it for popcorn, you actually want to totally leave all those ears of corn on the stalks until they're all dried out, until the stalks are dried out, the ears are dried out, the whole plant is dried out. It looks like a dead cornfield. Then you want to harvest them. You want to dry those on the stalks.
I want to grow popcorn.
Yeah, it's fun. It really is fun. We grew some last year for the first time. And then again, if you're using any kind of heirloom corn, you just keep back your own seed.
Yep.
So
then you have to worry about the hybrid and the other GMO
That's
stuff.
right. Yeah, because anytime again, hybridized plants are not unsafe to eat because hybridization is a natural process, but you can't keep seeds from hybridized plants because you don't know which parent they're going to react like. So you don't know what you're going to get or if they're even going to be able to reproduce.
Yeah.
All right. Our late season crops, how are we doing on time?
1:51. So we're 52 minutes in, and usually we'll do a Q&A for like 30 minutes.
Okay.
So
I think we're doing good on time then.
yes.
So our late season crops, these are the ones that love the hottest part of our year. Okay. And I know so many people, they just quit gardening like in July, and people will run into me and they're like, oh, you're still gardening? And I'm like, yeah, we're still eating. So you find things that will adapt to your climate, and that's what you focus on and grow. So 3 to 4 weeks before moving outdoors, I like to put most of these late season crops in pretty much around now in May, like May 15th is maybe the latest I'll get these in the ground. And that's so that they have enough time to grow. All of our winter squashes we do in the hottest part of the year. We focus our summer squashes on that early spring where it's kind of nice and gentle hot outside. The winter squashes can take the super hot, our watermelon and cantaloupe. And then we're going to direct seed okra, yard-long green beans, which most people are not familiar with. And it's crazy because they're such an amply producing green bean. They love the heat. They're a member of the cowpea family, so they do taste a little bit different from a traditional green pea. But I don't even plant more than like 8 of these plants because they're so prolific. You're going to have more green beans than you know what to do with. The cowpeas or dried beans are really popular in the South. And then again, your corn, and then also peanuts and sweet potatoes. Those are all things that love the hottest part of the year. So like, look, this is this giant list of things that we can be growing in the hottest part of the year when everybody's quitting.
Yeah.
So, and this is what it looks like in the garden. You can see there's some dead corn over here that I'm just waiting to harvest. You can see cucumbers that are dying on the vine over here because cucumbers don't like that really hot weather. Yeah. But the watermelon's doing great. There's a bunch of okra in the back that's doing great. So
yeah, our okra went through early September, and then we were like, okay, we're done.
Yeah. What is it you said before we got started about okra? It's a confidence boosting plant. Yes, I love that.
Because that'll grow like wildfire in Texas.
Yeah, if you want to grow something that will make you feel like give you some confidence that
the
you can do
tomatoes
this.
for me have also been a confidence booster.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
Not the heirloom ones are a little more complicated.
They are.
But.
They're a little bit finicky.
Yeah.
All right. So again, it's really important. You can look at planting dates online. You can talk to fellow gardeners and find out when they do things. But everybody has your own microclimate in your specific area. You have a different lighting from the sun. You have different air patterns from the obstacles and things around you. Maybe you have trees, maybe you have buildings, maybe you have a different amount of concrete around you. Like there's so many things that are variables in your own microclimate that you need to start somewhere, but then you need to adopt your own calendar for your own very specific area. So keep lots of notes. I kept having people ask me about our garden journal. I do share in our classes how we set our garden journal up. And then finally, I just made a blank one, and it's available on our website.
Oh, that's nice.
It's got everything in here that you could possibly need. So it's got a spot for a master calendar. It's got yields set up so you can keep track of.
Can you put it to the camera?
Yeah, sorry.
It might be backwards.
I don't know how. Yeah, I think we did
see.
this last time also where we had this problem. John's going to come in here a second. He's going to be like, this is not what you do. Yeah. Anyways, master yields, a garden plan. So like, I forget the camera's up there. Rebecca was talking about how she drew hers out. It's got a daily journal so you can keep track of what you're doing. And then it's got pages for each and every variety of what you're growing.
Wow,
so you can keep notes.
Awesome.
So just so you know, when you're keeping a journal, the things that you need to keep track of for every crop that you grow. So like when you're growing tomatoes, this is what you need to know. The date you planted it in the ground, maybe the date you seeded it since you started yours from seed, the variety, the first day you harvest, and the last day you harvest. Okay. And then I like to keep like a running total of what I'm harvesting. So every week when I go out in my garden and harvest, I write down how many pounds of each thing. And that's very beneficial because I'll get people, I'll do an event, a meal or something, and people want to know, what do you have growing in the middle of the 3rd week of June? Yeah. Well, I can go through my garden journal and I can look at my yields and I can be like, well, I should have this many pounds of this and this many pounds of that. It's helpful if you're going to try to plan a canning day. Well, when am I going to have all my beets come in? I can look at my journal. When I was trying to plan my garden for this year, I wanted to have a lot more broccoli than I typically do. And so I was able to look at my last harvest date over the last 10 years. And I could tell you, well, May 1st is about the last time I'll ever harvest broccoli. And so I'm able to plan according to that. But those are those key pieces of information that everybody needs to know about each of the crops that you want to focus on.
Okay. Oh, and he wants me to press the button. So, okay. Where is it? Done. Okay, so this garden journal is on the website for Plum Fabulous.
It is, yeah. Okay. Yeah, sweet. So you can print it out and then you can print out like as many pages as you want. Or you can go get, I actually use, when I'm in the garden,
let me try to hold it up closer.
Yeah.
All right.
It's just a PDF version that you can print out for yourself and put it in whatever. I put it in this folder with the fancy sticker and stuff, but you're going to print your own out. When I'm in my garden, I actually have like a little notebook that is waterproof. It's called a Write in the Rain book. And all my notes go in there. But it is set up as the same way as this. Just to give people this, I just did this so people get a head start on, like, they don't even know what to write down. Like they're going to keep a journal and they go in there and they're like, I don't even know what to write. Like,
so that's cool that it's all, and it was very organized too.
Yeah. And that's because, I've actually been through several books now. Like I've been doing this long enough. And so when I transition, it takes me like 2 or 3 years to fill a book up. And when I would transition to a new one, I'd get a fresh chance to like, you know, what did I actually use in this journal? And so these are all the key pieces. Again, we are so focused on what can I do the least amount of effort to get the most amount of output, right? And so I want to keep the fewest records that I need to accomplish the goal of keeping records. I want to do the least amount of weeding. I want to plant the best varieties for my area, so I'm maximizing output there. I want to nail the dates as close as I can so I get the most out of my production. Spring crops are really great because for the most part, they're just going to grow until a freeze.
Yep.
And so you have to keep that in mind because some things are going to be in your garden all summer long. And some things like my squashes, I know are going to come out. And so I have to have stuff ready to go in those spots when they die from the squash plants, which I know they're going to, or like the corn beds, I know I'm going to harvest those. So those are going to become empty, but the rest of the beds are not. They're going to be full the whole summer long.
Yep.
So
keep producing.
Yeah. All right.
So that's the whole slideshow.
Yeah, I think so. This is just some more information about where you can find information that we've shared
and
before.
You should also, if in case some people haven't signed up for your course with Parallel Times University, plug that because that was very informative as well.
So Melanie Rubin with Parallel Times University, she has 2 courses available on her website. One is just a 1-hour-long soil building course, which is fabulous. It really breaks down, like if you want to understand how to build the fabulous soil that you're going to have for your garden, take this 1-hour class. Or if you want to become a master at doing this, she spent 6 months pulling everything out of my brain possible about gardening. And so in the master class, you get the soil building class, you get our 80-page gardening guide and book. And it was a 6-month live class that we did. It was an hour and a half per session, longer on a lot of them. And it's the most detailed information I've ever shared anywhere. Like
and all the slides,
there's so many slides
on the portal.
There's a bunch of handouts that go with it, and so it's really great that it's recorded because it's way too much to take in at once. Like it's definitely something you need to watch and go do for a year, and then come back and watch it again, and then go do it for a year. But this, like, it took me 15 years to acquire this knowledge, and you can get it in 9 hours of watching these videos. So,
and the list too that you have for the different seasons and the veg or what you would want to plant. Then it's like a cheat sheet, not a cheat sheet, but like a reference sheet.
And it's not just about growing the garden. It's how to install drip irrigation. It's how to design your walkways. It's how to harvest your vegetables. We do talk about every single variety we cover every variety in detail, when to seed it, when to harvest it, what to look for, problems you may have with it. But then we tell you with every single plant variety what to do to store it. So whether it's dehydrating herbs and using dried herbs, or what you can or what you can freeze or what you can dry, and then how to store those things. Because that's the other half. People always want to get into homesteading. I do lots of homesteading talks for lots of different organizations, and they want to know how to grow all this stuff. But like we were talking about, what do you then do with all the food? Growing it is only half of it.
Yeah, I had, for the first time ever last year, finally a successful season where we had so many tomatoes, so much okra. And there comes a point where it's like, I can't eat any more of this.
Absolutely.
So it's like, okay, so this year I'm going to take it to the next level. Pickle the okra.
Yeah.
I did make, with the Roma tomatoes, I made sauce, pasta sauce. But then the seeds, I didn't take seeds out of that. So I was learning that. And I grew a lot of basil, so I blended that in, but it looked more like salsa.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So there's a learning curve to all that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what I have learned, we have a tool called the Folly Food Mill, which is from the 1950s. It's a strainer that takes all the seeds and skin off of tomatoes.
Yep.
And so there's a couple tools like from the 30s, 40s, and 50s that if you can get your hands on, they really make this easier. But that was during the time period where they were all still doing this stuff. And so those sorts of things are worthwhile investments. We just got into pressure canning ourselves because again, like you have all this harvest, and what's the point? You don't want to grow all this stuff and then feed it to your chickens. That's not the goal. The goal is to feed yourself, but this stuff is seasonal. So we eat seasonal, but again, you're also trying to grow this stuff so that you have things to eat in the off seasons when the seasons are slower. And even this morning, I have an 18-year-old son who was telling me about his garden that he's going to have someday, and about how it's going to have lettuce and broccoli and celery. And I was like, okay, well, what about the other 9 months of the year?
Yeah.
Because all those things you just described, like they have a pretty small growing window, you know? And so, so just things to keep in mind.
Awesome. Let's open it up for questions. Yay. That was fabulous. That was like an information dump.
I know. I do that all the time.
I love it, though.
I always feel bad.
You can tell how passionate you are about it, too.
Yeah, thank you.
I appreciate that. All right. So the Lord is channeling through you with this, I feel. Because I really do think that. Because I think that people are wanting to do this. Like you said, they want a homestead, but it is hard.
Yeah.
And I know this has all helped me a lot too. So
that's great.
Thank you. All right, y'all. I know we only have 7 live, and I know people watch the replay. You'll get the slides and copies of all that in the Kajabi portal. But let's go ahead and answer some questions. Someone asked, what is the name of the program that you're using, Rebecca? I think at the beginning when I designed the digital one, I used Canva. It's a free program where you can design really anything. So I just took the shapes of our garden beds, and then I just took long horizontal lines, and you can save it as a JPEG, as a PDF, whatever.
Yeah. If you're going to do that, just make sure that you either mark on your drawing or make your drawing to scale if you can somehow, so that you know the side. Well, no, so that like if your bed is 4 feet on one side, you want to make it so you could like measure it somehow. You want to know the dimensions. In the back of our book, in Appendix F is the plant spacing guide, so it tells you how many plants you can get per foot. So you need to know, like on yours, if your wicking beds are what, 4x4?
Yeah, they're squares. They're not rectangles, but I think that's right. Maybe they're 3 feet.
Let's say that they're 3x4, so that gives her 12 square foot of area per bed. If she didn't know that it was 12 square feet, and maybe she's looking at it and she thinks they're 3x3 squares, well, that's only 9 square feet. So if I was planting tomato plants and I only had 9 square feet, I'm only going to get 9 tomato plants. I'm going to seed out 9 tomato plants, and then I'm going to go out to my garden and I'm going to be like, wait a minute, this bed is 3x4. I have 12 square feet. Now I have 4 squares that I could have put tomatoes that I didn't, you know, and so you just want to keep those things in mind. If you're going to use one of those programs somewhere, make sure you have the actual dimensions so that you can calculate how many plants per square foot.
So when you do your lights and everything inside with the seeds, you know exactly how many.
Yeah. So like if I'm growing Swiss chard, that's 1 per square foot. right? So if I'm trying to seed out things, I need to know if I need to plant 9 or 12, you know, you got to know those exact dimensions. I don't have my garden journal here with me, but the one that you saw earlier, I always write on the sides of each bed the dimensions of it. And that's because even though I draw mine on graph paper, I don't want to sit there and count squares.
Yeah.
I just want to look at it and know, okay, that's 20 feet long.
Yep.
So I like to write my dimensions on the side.
All right, let's see. What did you say? Oh, someone already did that one. When will the replay be out? We usually get them up pretty quickly. I think actually with this Webinar Jam program, it automatically exports it as a link, and then we just upload it to Kajabi. So what I know, if you email helpdesk@Live Free Academy, we can offer clarity, but I know typically it's within like a business day or so. Academy. And I think you get emailed the replay link too. John does the tech stuff. So sorry, I'm not more helpful there, but you'll get it soon. And then Brianne's gardening and soil building courses are fabulous.
Is that Lynette?
Yeah. Got an endorsement over here.
Thank you. Lynette's been a great student. She's been helping a lot in our garden too.
Yay.
And what was really fun, her and Belinda started last year before the last exit and build that you guys had here in Bastrop. They came out to the garden and harvested all the potatoes that we ate for the lunch when the meal was at our house.
Oh, yeah.
So circle around. They've been coming for a whole year now, and the last time they were at my house, they planted potatoes.
Oh,
so they actually have gotten to see like a whole
cycle.
1 year cycle in my garden of the major things and come out and help for that. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
The gardening session you did on April 12th, I sent it to our Live Free and our Exit and Build and Freedom Family Fellowship people. It's like, okay, we need to see it in real life. This is great doing the slides, just showing the pictures.
So hands-on though is really
the hands-on too is very nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't really see any other questions. Is there anything that you would like to add?
I don't know. I can't think. Does anybody have any specific questions about specific crops? Like maybe you've tried corn in the past and you've had trouble, or you've tried squash in the past and you've got a question about that. If anybody has any questions about those, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, this is your chance, y'all. While Brianne's here.
Yeah. We didn't talk about like green beans. I'm just gonna ramble off whatever tips I can think of. How's that?
Okay, that sounds great.
Green beans. You have to harvest green beans like every 2 days in the middle of the summer, 2 or 3 days at the max. So I always be sure and plant green beans on the sides of my beds where I can comfortably sit on my bottom and harvest them. Because you literally have to turn yourself or the plant upside down to find all the beans on the bottom.
Oh, wow.
So just keep that in mind. I really like to plant a burgundy green bean because then I can see it. It doesn't blend in so much. Yeah, or a chartreuse green bean because they're much easier to see. It's really important if you are going to be putting up the harvest that you have to do it within like maybe 2 days of picking stuff. So a lot of times people will harvest and then put it in the fridge for a week and they don't get around to eating it. So they think, okay, now I'm going to put it up. Well, now you really have passed that window, that peak time of putting stuff up. And when I say putting stuff up, I mean either preparing it to freeze it or preparing it to can it. Okay. Yep. So that is something you have to be very aware of when you're starting to get to these stages where you're producing a lot of output. So planning a day where you can because it's time consuming, right? Yeah. So for tomatoes, I don't always have a day where there's literally weeks in June where I'm harvesting 100 pounds of tomatoes a day. Like I can't harvest that and come in and can that. It's just too much work. So I will freeze the tomatoes. You want to core it and you put the whole tomato in a Ziploc bag and just freeze it. And then when you're ready to can, when you have some time and you're ready to can, you just put those frozen tomatoes in a sink full of hot water. The skin will peel right off. And then you can go ahead and follow your canning recipe.
I have 2 Ziploc bags full of tomatoes that were
from
surplus
last year
in our deep freeze.
Yeah.
And when our guest house flooded a month ago, we had to move everything around.
Yeah.
Go through the deep freeze like, oh
yeah.
So anyway, I'm going to play with that.
Yeah.
Get some practice before we get more tomatoes growing.
Yeah.
But Yeah.
And it's a good idea too, if you're going to get into canning, just to make sure that you have like all your supplies on hand. You know, there's nothing worse than like getting everything ready and then you realize like you're a lid or two short. So
I am so embarrassed to admit this, but we harvested the potatoes and carrots, and it was so much food on one day that we did it. But the next day was like our big Thanksgiving, where we hosted John's family and all sorts of people, and I had everything like in a bucket outside, and I was going to use it all. But when I went back out to the bucket, the carrots got slimy because I mixed the two in the same. And if I just would have put the potatoes in a different bucket or tub or whatever.
So there's a couple things that you have to be sure are thoroughly dried. So we're about to start harvesting onions, potatoes, garlic, corn, sweet potatoes. All of those things need to go on drying racks. And so we have, they're actually our old compost sifters frames. And so it's just a giant wooden frame, and it's covered with 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch hardware cloth. And we have several of them, and we put them over a sheet somewhere, sometimes in the middle of our living room, and lay these items in a single row out on them to dry out thoroughly. So like potatoes, you don't want to wash that dirt off. Or really any of these crops, you don't want to wash them because
they got like mushy.
They will, absolutely,
yucky.
yeah. So you have to put them, you can kind of rub the dirt off, but you don't want to, those skins are just so thin. Like you could scratch a potato skin with your fingernail with no problem when you first harvest them. Those skins have not like thickened and hardened like the ones at the grocery store. So they need to go on a single layer on these drying racks until they can dry out thoroughly and develop that skin that allows them to be stored for you to eat all summer long, right? Same thing with like winter squashes and stuff. Even the corn that we dry on the stalk, we bring them inside and we pull all those husks off. Then they spend another 2 weeks on those drying racks to make sure that they're totally dry before you try to store them. Onions, if you store those and you get one that goes bad, it'll rot everything. Yeah, so we divvy up, like our potatoes, we divvy them up into burlap sacks, like 50 pounds at a time. The onions, we keep in like 20-pound sacks. And you want to use your white ones up first because they'll spoil faster than the reds. So little things like that really make a difference when you're trying to get into like harvesting for the homestead.
I was so devastated.
Yeah.
I was like, I finally grew it. I was successful.
Any kind of root crop, carrots, beets, anything like that. When you're going to store them, you need to take the tops off.
Yeah, because I had left the green.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely.
And then, like, literally within a day, the mush, because I had washed them off, and then the potatoes got wet, and it was just in a bucket, like, outside.
Breaks your heart. Like 90 days down the drain, right there. Yeah.
I was like, no, we're supposed to serve this on our Thanksgiving.
Yeah. So if you don't take those leaves off, those leaves will actually continue to draw moisture out of those roots because those are all root crops. They're doing their job, right?
Yeah.
And so if they can't pull moisture from the ground, they will pull it back out of the leaves. And so take those leaves off and store them separately. Like if you're going to eat your beet greens, just keep them in a different bag in your fridge. Really, I like if you got homegrown carrots, I was eating one on the way here. Like you want to keep those in a pan of water. Yeah, because they will get soft.
Yeah, they get firm or whatever.
Yeah.
I just had something. Oh yeah, so we harvested the garlic, and I read that it's good to air it out, and so I didn't know about the drying racks. That's a great recommendation.
And then it's also your compost sifter. So it fits on your wheelbarrow. You can use it to sift compost, unless you want to build like a mechanized one, like what we have. But then you're also using it for drying racks. And so
I was thinking about building like an outdoor little washing station and where the drying racks could go, like a processing area.
So you don't want to dry your stuff outside because everything will eat it. Like the mice will get into it and stuff. That's why like I will dry my onions outside. I will dry garlic outside, but like my potatoes, my corn, and my sweet potatoes, I dry them in the house just because I'm worried about critters. Critters don't like onions and garlic. Surprisingly, I don't know. That's why you were saying you didn't have very many. That's right. You didn't have very many pests, and so a lot of times I will interplant garlic just for pest control. Yeah, because things don't like.
Because our greens had a lot of holes, the bok choy and stuff like the year before, but this year with the garlic in the corners, like we didn't have any issues with that.
That's great. So. That's awesome.
All right, I am hogging up all the questions. Can you recommend a worm farm for red wrigglers?
Oh, I don't know. No, I can't. I'm sorry.
I did just go. I went to the homestead conference. So I
In
don't know.
Waco?
Yeah.
Lucky you.
Yeah, I went to Homestead Heritage. I like
Yay.
literally just a few days ago.
Yeah.
But anyway, I took a picture of a booth that does this. So Cindy, bear with me. I'm pretty sure I have it on my phone. And if not, I had a flyer so I can look for this for you. Vermiculture.
Mm-hmm.
Is that similar to this? And it was
when you're growing red worms. The place we get our manure actually has red worm, like they do vermiculture. And so when we get our rabbit manure, we get whole colonies of red worms. So I don't have to grow my own.
I didn't actually take a picture, but I think, my little bag, I have a flyer, but
I don't think that there's any farm that like has better red worms than other farms. Like you just need to get your red worms to your house and start feeding them whatever you're going to feed them, and they're going to be fine. I wouldn't get too caught up in that.
Don't overthink it.
That's right.
Okay. Can you recommend a worm? Oh, that was the same one. When you harvest greens and other produce to eat soon, do you wash it before putting it in the fridge?
So greens are a little different. It depends on the time of the year. If it's super duper hot and you're harvesting greens, you need to dunk them in water right away, like while you're in the garden, to get the field heat off of those greens, because they're going to want to wilt as soon as possible. If it's cold, I can bring them inside and I can wrap leaves in wet paper towels, and they'll last quite a few days in my fridge that way. If you do want to wash them, you have to make sure that they're thoroughly dry before you put them in any kind of bag whatsoever. I like to store all of my produce in produce bags from the store that I buy like my apples in and stuff. The ones that have the holes in them. Yeah. So that's the best. I get those from my friends. My friends all save them for me also so that I can store stuff in those. But it's tricky with greens, just depending on the time of year. If you want a green in Texas that will grow year round, you want to grow Swiss chard. Specifically, you want to grow Ford Hook Giant Swiss chard, because that's the variety that will do good here year round. Ford Hook. Yeah. But you want to be sure and harvest first thing in the morning or late at night. Don't go out and harvest at 3:00. Like your plants, it's going to look bad. Like it doesn't matter how much field soaking you give it, it's gonna look bad. So harvest when the day is nice.
Okay, there seemed to be a shortage of red wrigglers this year for some reason.
I don't know. I was telling Rebecca before this, I know there's a shortage of meat chickens right now. I know there's a shortage of eggs, or of layer hens. I couldn't believe Tractor Supply was selling chicks for like $6 a piece. Wow. I was shocked. I just couldn't believe it. That's crazy. To me.
I've never bought chicks. We just have our chickens. They do their thing.
Mm-hmm.
So what do they usually charge?
Like $2 at the most. Wow. If you're paying $2 for a chicken,
we were talking about this earlier. The air chilled chicken from the store, because I want to start growing. Are all of ours analyzing it in them. I've been trying to start that process the last year and a half, but I haven't gotten to meat birds yet. So I still buy the air chilled chicken, and it went from usually it was $8 for a little thing that would be enough for our family of 4, and it was $16 for the same container. And maybe the weight was a little bit different, but still, it was a substantial increase in price. I'm like, what the heck? And I didn't realize there was a shortage of the meat birds.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. Supply chain. And then earlier this year, the egg shortage situation was wild.
Well, that's such a good reminder of why we do this.
Yes.
This is why we do this, because they're so fragile. Yeah. And so if you like eating chicken, you better make sure you know a place to stock chicken. Yeah. Or if you like milk and stuff. And so it takes a long time to build that network, and I will say though that when you're in a great rural area like this, once you find those networks, a lot of them have been around for many generations, and they're not really going anywhere. They're pretty solid.
And if your gardens pop in, then you can give them produce trade for the meat and trade for
I do so much bartering. I have friends with I have 2 kids that work at a dairy, and we get lots of milk from them, but I trade bread to the dairy and I get milk. And then I also sell chicken to the dairy. We get sheep now. We just got into sheep this year.
Oh, that's nice.
It is. It has been fun. We were talking about grass before we got started here. And so grass is such a pain in the gardener's butt, but if you have animals and you're grazing livestock, now grass is your friend. Yeah. It is your feed. So our sheep are 100% grass fed. I was out mowing one of our fields one day, and we only have 2 acres. We have a tiny area, but I was mowing this pasture that always grows a ridiculous ton of grass. And I like literally stopped on the mower and I was like, this is done. We just watched Common Ground. Like,
oh yes.
And so I was watching all these things about how animals can redo your land. And one of my kids that works at the dairy, they have 800 acres that they manage for their meat herd. And she moves all the fencing for their regenerative agricultural program that they have there. And even their dairy cows. It's one of the only 2 farms in Texas where they do
grazing.
Yeah. So they even rotationally grade their dairy herd. And so I was sitting there on this mower and I was like, this is stupid. I'm getting sheep. So like the next week we had sheep. And
that's a good strategy. We had a horse when we first moved in and we never had to mow. And unfortunately,
I know that.
But then now, like the lawn, John's having to mow a lot. It's
you're
such a time suck.
You're paying to mow and manage the grass that an animal would literally do for you. Yeah. So the thing about sheep, because everyone's like, well, why don't you get goats? Okay, if you don't have a fence for goats,
they'll jump.
They just want to get out. They spend all their time trying to get out. Sheep don't. Sheep are herd animals. They just want to be where the other sheep is. In fact, if you're out there, they just want to be with you. So they stay on your property. You don't have to have a trailer to haul sheep, because we would love to get like a cow or something, but I don't have a trailer to haul a cow. Yeah. And so sheep, literally, when it was time to butcher them, threw them in the back of the truck, like made a little fence out of some pieces of.
They're just chilling.
Fence panel. Yeah. And it was like nothing. And we, tastes great.
Yeah. And you can make wool, right?
We literally converted our grass into meat. Yeah. So that's the beautiful thing about small animals on acreage.
We need to see, after the land summit this year, I'm shifting everything in life.
It takes time. It takes time. And you will overwhelm yourself trying to do too much too fast. So don't you handle what you can, and like it's like having kids. Like you just grow slowly into being able to expand your heart and yourself to manage all these aspects.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think too, for us, we were afraid about getting more livestock because our birds, it was so much work and they were just not producing eggs, or maybe they were, but they were free ranging. So we just couldn't find them. So we just built an enclosure for them and they still have plenty of space. And now we're getting so many eggs every day. I don't even know what to do with it. And I'm like, I'm excited to go give them water and and feed.
So
and this.
It's like that with all aspects of homesteading. If you're doing it wrong, it's so much harder, right? Like that's why we do what we do here, because like we spent the years doing gardening where we were doing it wrong. And oh my gosh, it was so much harder. Yeah. And so you take the time to learn from people that have done this. Like just go learn what they were doing, because they figured it all out. Yeah. I'm sure that homesteading conference was amazing, because you got all these people who, some of them have been doing it a long time, and some of them, this is their full-time gig. Like, and this is what they do.
They really figured out the entrepreneurial aspect. I was telling Lynette and the other ladies who came out for the gardening day on Sunday, because I had just gotten back. It was Friday and Saturday. The people who live there, there's 1,500 residents. It's a Christian-based community, and they are like super entrepreneurial. Like there's different booths where they have like the goat soap, they goat milk soap. They have natural cleaning supplies. They make their own clothes. They have leather, like woodworking, like basically anything you could possibly imagine. There's even a booth where this 6-year-old kid was making boba teas, selling them for $12 for one boba tea. They had a huge line. I'm like, that kid's got to figure it out. Well, there was other people working the register, but still, just to say, like they have they know how to make revenue on the land, so it's synergistic.
That's right. Making revenue from the land. That's right. And you notice it was different people doing different things. It's not one dude that does it all, because you can't. You just can't. You can't do it all. I mean, it's like we're just barely feeding ourselves.
Yes. You know? But the bartering aspect that you were talking about, like that's where it's like, find what I can sense the passion from you regarding gardening. Like my friend Chris, I can sense the passion for beekeeping, but it's like, it's all the village. We all come together to trade, and then the needs are met. And it's not like you need 30 different professions. You just focus on what sparks joy. And then,
that's right. Yeah. And you don't want to spend all your time doing something you don't enjoy doing.
Yes. You know? Exactly.
But that network, that community is so important in this. So.
Indeed. All right. We are at our time just about. I don't see any other questions. So this was awesome. Yeah. So we'll upload the slides. Someone was asking about a replay. I would imagine in the next 1 to 2 business days, that'll be up on your Kajabi account. I'm pretty sure though, this program he uses, Webinar Jam, just literally like emails you the link, the replay link. So you should get it very soon. But if you have any issues, the help desk at liveforyu.academy. And with all that being said, I would like to thank you, Brianne, for your wisdom and being here. And I would like to thank all of you Live For You Academy members for joining us. And also the folks who weren't able to join live, watching the replay. Thank you so much. So much gratitude. And I hope that you took a lot away from this and learned a lot. So on that note, we will sign out. All right. Bye, y'all.